me read to you something of interest. You ever hear the story of Lester Sumrall casting the demon out of the girl in the Bilibid prison, like in the Philippines? It's an interesting story. It's a classic. Every generation needs to rehearse it. He's doing his missionary thing, and the whole nation is watching the news about a girl who's so demonized that she's got bite marks and saliva appearing on her body. Hair from a demon that would materialize in her cell would be under her fingernails, and they could take samples of the fiber and they couldn't match it to any species they knew of. And the whole nation's fixated on this, and Lester Sumrall is so busy buried in his missionary work that he never even knew what was going on in the country. Suddenly the news comes to him about this, and immediately he repents for being preoccupied with his ministry, when really the invitation to deliver a girl and touch a nation was knocking on the door for a week, but he didn't know it because he was busy. So I'm reading articles like this, stuff I never used to read, foreign affairs. To me, this is what, politicians do, not preachers. And just catch this. Since 1974, more than 90 countries have made transitions to democracy. By the turn of the century, approximately 60% of the world's independent states were democratic. The democratization of Mexico and Indonesia in the late 1990s and the more recent color revolutions in Georgia and the Ukraine formed the crest of a tidal wave of democratic transitions. Even in the Arab world, the trend is visible. In 2005, democratic forces in Lebanon rose up to peacefully drive out Syrian troops, and Iraqis voted in multi-party parliamentary elections for the first time in half a century. And what does that mean to you? Well, in every one of those countries, a worship service like this was never possible. So nobody could be exposed to what you have and take for granted, and I take for granted. But now those things are possible. So the kingdom can advance when culture is opened up. There's an ideological war over how nations operate and how freedom ought to happen. And God wants to win the war so people can hear the gospel. And this is how it's fought. But most of us don't get it. But celebrations of democracy's triumph are premature. In a few short years, the democratic wave has been slowed by a powerful, authoritarian, antichrist, I'll add, undertow. And the world has slipped into a democratic recession. Democracy has recently been overthrown or gradually stifled in a number of key states, including Nigeria, Russia, Thailand, Venezuela, most recently Bangladesh and the Philippines. In December 2007, electoral fraud in Kenya delivered another abrupt and violent setback. At the same time, most newcomers to the Democratic Club and some longstanding members have performed poorly. Even in many of the countries, such as the success stories of Chile and Ghana and Poland and South Africa, there are serious problems of governance. Deep pockets of disaffection in South Asia, where democracy once predominated. India is now surrounded by politically unstable, undemocratic states, and aspirations for democratic progress have been thwarted everywhere in the Arab world except Morocco. Whether by terrorism and political and religious violence, as in Iraq, externally manipulated societal divisions, as in Lebanon, or authoritarian regimes themselves, as in Egypt and Jordan, and some of the Persian Gulf monarchies, such as Bahrain. Before democracy can spread further, it must take deeper root where it has already sprouted. It's a basic principle of any military or geopolitical campaign that at some point, an advancing force must consolidate its gains before it conquers more territory. Emerging democracies must demonstrate that they can solve their governance problems and meet their citizens' expectations for freedom, justice, and a better life and a fair society. If democracies do not more effectively contain, here we go, crime and corruption, and generate economic growth, relieve economic injustice and inequality, and secure freedom so that real law can prevail, people are going to lose faith and turn to an authoritarian, antichrist alternative, I'll add. Struggling democracies must be consolidated so that all levels of society become enduringly committed to democracy or to freedom of religion. It's the best form of government. They must know that, and they must be committed to their country's constitutional norms and constraints. Western policymakers can assist this process. So what is the problem? I study when you have people in these countries, especially the poor, that have to live with abusive police and security forces, multiple forms of bad government, incompetent state bureaucracies, corrupt and inaccessible judiciaries. What's the cause of this?